for two very good reasons. I want to thank all of the members of Women on the Brink who have been working on this program for weeks. They have just gone way beyond. And I want to thank our sponsors. So it's not just Women on the Brink. It's the League of Women Voters of the Elgin area. It's AAW, the Elgin branch. It's Gail Borden Public Library, the YWCA, and the Wild Child Center. So we have tried to put together an awful lot of material on this. But the second reason I wanted to be the first speaker is that I wanted to be the one to introduce Patricia Chamberlain. She is so knowledgeable about early learning, but she also has such a local touch that when you see her come in after me, you're going to realize why she is the moderator. Pat, you're on.
Thank you. And/or I said yes. Welcome. Our goal today, our outcome, if all goes well to us, is that we will walk out of here becoming more aware than you already are, and willing to advocate and move, take action against the devastating impact of poverty on children's lives. For some of you, I recognize, this is the second chapter. We did the first chapter last year, and we will do a third chapter next year, and we'll be focusing on mental health issues. But tonight, we're going to focus on education. And you already heard from Jennifer as a welcome. I'm going to walk you through the plan, what we're going to do tonight. We are really, really honored to have Mitch listen. Katie Cox from the school district and Anna Moeller to be our presenters. And they're going to give us a short sort of synopsis of the state of the art in each of their fields. Mitch doing demographics, Katie doing the education piece, and Anna taking a look at that bigger legislative agenda. Then we will have an illustrious panel that will be talking about what does it look like, what do the boots on the ground in our town look like, and then we will take questions from the audience. In your packets there are little 3x5 index cards, so you can ask questions of the presenters, you can ask questions of the panelists. Just write them down, and we have Vannas going around. And if you need more cards, you can have more questions. So we'll answer the questions as well. And then we'll do a wrap up, and then you will get to go home and go home and spend a lovely evening pondering what can you do and how are you going to do it. If that works, then we will have had a successful night. Okay? And we are going to start sort of contextualizing our work today with a short clip from Dana Susskind, who is a leader in our field, a pediatrician, but a leader in our field. And Michelle Esquivel hooked us up, and so she is doing actually an opening for this very event. So she's going to set the context for our work today. It's very short.
Good evening, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. My name is Dana Susskind, and I'm a pediatric cochlear implant surgeon and social scientist at the University of Chicago. I wanted to start off by saying just how excited and honored I am to be talking to such amazing leaders and advocates gathered together for this important forum hosted by Women on the Brink. As a pediatric physician and a surgeon, I specialize in giving deaf children cochlear implants, helping them access sound, hearing, and spoken language. But I've always believed that my obligation to my patients doesn't end when the surgery ends. Rather, it ends when my patient does well, and when they go on to live happier, healthier lives. And when your patients are children, The key to a happy, healthy life is the brain. Science shows us that children need two things for healthy brain development. One, a rich early language environment with lots of loving serve and return interactions with parents and caretakers. And secondly, protection from toxic stress in order to build healthy brains during the earliest time period. Because so much exciting brain growth happens during those first 3 years of life. Some 1 million new neural connections happen every second. A full 80 to 85% of the physical brain is grown during this time period. But all too often, parents and caretakers have obstacle after obstacle after obstacle thrown in their path as they try to provide children with the components critical to healthy brain development. No paid leave, irregular work hours, lack of affordable health care, childcare costs that can cost more than a mortgage or state college tuition. I could go on, but you know the challenges. Chances are that you or someone you know is living through them at this very moment. But I am here to tell you something that almost seems too obvious, that the potential of children depends on the support for their parents. Fortunately, neuroscience offers us a roadmap to ensure parents receive the support they need to allow children to thrive. We can apply what we know about foundational brain development in children to inform a new way of approaching early childhood and to prevent disparities before they occur. What we need is a society that offers more robust supports for parents and children, and in this fight, we all have a role. We need to foster community as parents, caretakers, and those who care about the next generation. We need to forge a collective identity and see every child as our own child and worth fighting for. And we need to push forward change, to work together to allow families the support they need so that they can raise the next generation. For all children to flourish, society must attend to them and allow for their healthy brain development from birth. And I truly believe the way to do it is by building a parent nation, a society where support for parents is seen not merely as heartwarming, but essential, a key driver for how we operate, fuel our economy, elect our officials, democratize opportunity, and carry society forward on our collective shoulders. Because ultimately, that is how we grant children the promise of their innate promise. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful forum.
What she said, huh? And there's more. If you want more information about Parent Nation, you can ask and we'll be happy to tell you. But she referenced the idea of change, and what we're here for is to spur on further change in order to mitigate the impacts of poverty on young children and provide a society that is healthy for them to grow up in. And because I'm an early childhood person, that means I have to read a book, and it has to be a kid's book. So if you don't like that, sorry. I bought it ostensibly for my granddaughter because I'm a good Mimi. However, I do happen to use it for work once in a while. And it's called Change Sings, and it's written by Amanda Gorman, who I am totally obsessed with at this point in my life. So if you aren't familiar with her work, Google her. And the illustrations by Lauren Long in here are phenomenal. I just gave you a little, I'm not gonna read you the whole book. I'll just give you a little touch of it, because what I want to do is frame today in terms of thinking about how we're all notes in a song, and we can all work together to sing along and change, make a beautiful, beautiful music to make change. And the beginning of her book says, "I can hear change humming in its loudest and proudest song. I don't fear change coming, so I can sing along." So as you listen to the speakers today, think about how do you want to connect and sing along? Which parts of the presentations and the talking points that we heard today engage you, and how do you want to sing? So we'll wrap that up. That's your lens for today. So to start us off, we are thrilled to welcome back to our stage Mitch Lifson from the Children's Advocate for Change. The bios are in here. I am not going to read how illustrious all of our speakers and our panelists are, but I encourage you to do so. And Mitch is our data wizard. He will be followed by Katie Cox, who is the Director of Early Learning Initiatives for U46. And finally, the State Senator, Anna Moeller, will be talking to us and wrapping it up with the sort of a policy and legislative agenda. I give you Mitch.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. What I hope to do here this evening, really, in the next 10 minutes is essentially give you a lay of the land, given the data that is out there from the Census Bureau and other sources. But of course, one of the great things about this event is that through your own stories and firsthand experiences, you can put that data into context. I've used here the 2020 census for Elgin because there was a more detailed breakout for this census on race and ethnicity, and you can see how it breaks out. This is for the entire population, nearly half Hispanic or Latino, just over 1/3 white alone, and then you can see the other percentages as they break out. So before I get to the next slide, anyone want to take a guess? How many think there are more men than women in Elgin? How many think there are more women? Okay, let's find out. There are just slightly more men in the city of Elgin, and you can see from this chart the breakout by age ranges, and what I really wanted to illustrate here was essentially that the median age in Elgin is slightly younger than the statewide median. But you can see the percentage that are under 5 and the total percentage of children that are in the community. Here's how it breaks out now. As many of you may know, the Census Bureau asks about race and ethnicity in 2 different questions. So for the 2020 census, for children, it was only available in the 2 categories. So first you can see the breakout by race, where almost half are white, but then when you break it out by ethnicity, really only about 23% are in the category of white, non-Hispanic or Latino individuals, and 62% Hispanic. Now that Hispanic category can be of any race, but what I also wanted to illustrate here is that if you then took a look at, this is the child population, right? And you can see 62% Hispanic or Latino compared to the overall population for the entire age range, which is 44%. So you can see as you get younger, there is a different demographic that occurs. These are the median household incomes. And again, what I wanted to illustrate here is the stark difference when you take a look at the 3 major categories, white alone, not Hispanic or Latino, around $80,000 for the median income. However, for Hispanic, $67,000, Black or African American, just under $40,000. So I just, for something that is coming up later, I just want you to keep in mind those differences that exist in household income, at least for the median rate. Anyone want to venture a guess on the child poverty rate in Elgin? How many say A? B? C? All right, here we go. Those of you who said B were correct. Just over 16% of children in Elgin are considered to be in poverty. That's in comparison to 10.5% for the city's overall rate for all children. Now, there is a breakdown by race and ethnicity. I just want to caution you when it comes to the statistic for Black children in poverty. That particular survey, because it has a smaller pool of individuals who were surveyed, has a high margin of error. But generally, all the other indicators do show a higher poverty rate. So that is the highest poverty rate, but keep in mind the highest percentage poverty rate doesn't necessarily translate when you take a look at the overall pool of children in poverty, because you can see from that bottom chart, in reality, Hispanic or Latino children make up a far larger number of children who are in poverty in Elgin compared to white alone, not Hispanic or Latino, and black. Now, the Census Bureau has made a determination that for generally a family of 3, the poverty threshold, so I'm showing you all these stats of how many children are considered below the federal poverty level, is 20,591. That standard was developed in 1963 by a statistician who figured out what the minimum nutritional requirements were for a family, and then determined, well, the family's spending about 1/3 of its income on food, so let's multiply it by 3. And then it's been adjusted by inflation, essentially, ever since then. There is something else called the supplemental poverty measurement that I'll just note, and that takes into account how much you spend for housing, clothing, food as well, and revenue takes into account not just your wages, but also any assistance you get for housing, energy, nutrition, tax credits, such as the Earned Income Tax Credit, Social Security, payroll taxes. Now, when you compare that number for a family of 4 with a mortgage, the supplemental poverty level is $29,959 compared to, for a family of 4, around $26,500. If you took a look for just last year at the poverty levels using the 2 different measurements, you'll see a significant difference because of the federal relief measures that Congress passed for children. However, if you took a look at a 3-year average in Illinois using the official census poverty level and then the supplemental poverty level, it's statistically almost the same. So there is that 1 year when we had additional assistance where it will vary. Generally, it's been the same. But I'd urge you to keep that in mind, again, for the end of this, because it speaks to what policy can do to address poverty. Now, along these same lines, there's an outfit at the University of Washington called the Center for Women's Welfare. And they said, all right, let's be realistic here. What does it really take for a household to meet its needs and to be essentially self-sufficient? And they said that if you are in Kane County, an adult who had 2 preschoolers, essentially you'd need an income of just under $83,000 to meet all of your needs, which, as you can tell, is a far cry from the official census level. And I note that only because while we are talking tonight in some context of how many children are below the federal poverty threshold and considered to be in poverty, there are far more families in the community, low income, who are in need, who have not reached that income level. So there are different indicators that go into poverty. There is not, for Elgin specifically, a number available that I was able to obtain on food insufficiency, but you can start to get some idea by the number of families who are receiving SNAP benefits. So overall, it's 13.2%, but again, you can start to see some of the differences that are developing by race and ethnicity. Again, with this stat for African American and Black households, you have to be careful because of the margin of error. But part of this, and then I'll get to another stat that also leads to it, lends itself to the question of, is there an issue when it comes to different races and or ethnicities in accessing benefits? So another gauge of income and how children are doing is whether they're considered by the State Board of Education to be low-income students. And one of the gauges that the State Board of Education uses is whether or not a child is eligible for a free breakfast or free lunch at the school. And the qualifications essentially vary from 185%, which gives you a reduced fee, and as you work your way down to a free meal. So again, keeping that in mind, in the Elgin School District, 61% of the students are considered low income. So again, this is just to kind of give you a gauge that even though there is the official poverty number, there are probably far more families in need that are just above that poverty threshold. Health insurance is another gauge of how people are doing. And again, now I put in the numbers for the entire community. Under the state's health insurance program for children, all kids, your status as to whether or not you were born in the US or not doesn't matter. You can get insurance coverage from the state if you qualify under the income levels. And there's even now provisions that if you are 42 years or older and undocumented to obtain health insurance. But I wanted to put this in because obviously even adults, if they're not healthy, it can have an impact on how children are doing. And you can see, again, the difference by demographic groups in who has health insurance. And again, the question is, why is it this way? Does it have something to do with accessing benefits? Housing stats, there are various metrics, but I will just say that generally the rule of thumb has been you should not be spending more than a third of your income on housing if possible. You saw the median income levels by demographic groups previously, right? It is lower for Black, Hispanic, and Latino families than white, non-Hispanic families. And what you can see from this chart is more African Americans and more Hispanics are renting versus white non-Hispanic. So again, just kind of keep in mind how that combination ends up getting put together of more people in a demographic group who are renting, but their income is lower. And then if you were to take the numbers further out, chances are in all of these categories, the calculation would show that in these categories for higher percentage of renters, they probably are spending a greater percentage of their income on housing. So, as has been noted, right, when you're in a state of poverty or you're short on funds, you might just be above the poverty threshold, but still needing income. You can have trouble with food sufficiency. You can have trouble with stable housing. You can have issues related to health care. And when you have issues related to health care, it will very often impact how that child is or isn't learning in a classroom. And so all of it plays into the health and success of a child. I just again want to go back though and say that policy can make a difference because with the expansion of the federal child tax credit that occurred last year and is now expiring, it cut the child poverty rate in the US by more than 40%, which is a significant amount. And probably if someone had suggested that maybe 5-6 years ago, they would have said that's a really high hurdle. But it was done, and it shows that policy can matter, and it can address a lot of these issues. So hopefully that gives you the overview, and I'll be happy to answer any questions later on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katie. I am the Director of Early Learning at U46. I've been there about 2 years, and thank you all for including me and our work in your panel tonight. Pat asked me to talk a little bit about the entire kind of post-pandemic educational landscape. but my focus in the school district's about this much of what's going on. So I did a little research this morning, and I'm going to share it with you just to give some context and orientation to kind of broader learning experiences post-pandemic, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more closely about early learning and what's happening in our community here at U46. So this was probably my favorite first of all, I am a stickler about details, and I notice that my lines are not lined up with my words, and that is really gonna bother me. So, all right, they weren't like that earlier today, so sorry about some of that, and hopefully it doesn't bother you as much as it bothers me. So I read this article that was really just adapted from a broadcast that was on National Public Radio, and it just talked about kind of 6 buckets of post-pandemic kind of consequences that we're seeing across the country in education. So when we went through, Pat and I were just talking, the pandemic, which started, in schools March 13th of 2020, and then depending on how long your district was closed and remote learning was happening, dependent on how much missed learning opportunities there were for the children enrolled in school. So if your district was out for a longer amount of time, then you had more learning opportunities that were lost. And in the states of, I know California and Illinois were mentioned as states that had the most significant school closures. So our impacts were seen to be greater. The higher poverty schools were hit the hardest, and they said that was for a few reasons. Kind of speaking to what Mitch was talking about, that really are Black and brown students, their families were more impacted by the pandemic, and then that impacted them more in missed learning opportunities. Different states saw different gaps, like I mentioned, depending on how long your school district and your schools were closed, depended on how much you lost in learning opportunities. Interestingly enough, high school graduation rates were not impacted during this time, but however, many high school graduates delayed college entry. I have 2 kids, and I could say that both of those things were very true. Like, the kids are very not in a hurry to get back into school once having that really nice break at home. So I'm sure that could be seen obviously nationally. But the great and most encouraging thing is that schools can do something about it. And there is a lot of work and resources done at federal and state and local levels right now to increase, the outcomes for our kids and what we can do for them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here in U46. So one thing that I'm going to share with you, I think I first began sharing this slide last year at some point, and I know when I show it to you, it'll make you gasp, but it's a really important piece of information for us. So the Illinois State Board of Education requires that we give a survey to every incoming kindergarten student 40 days after they start kindergarten. And so we've been doing this here in Elgin. I believe we were one of the first adopters of kids, and so that was we were the first. Pat's like, yes, we were. So that was probably 2015 was the year that we offered that. And so we have this information going back for many years. But what I want to show you is some information that I gathered last year to look at the impact of the pandemic. And so the first slide you're going to see on your left looks at the children's social emotional skills in 1920 and then in 21-22. And so I broke them out by race, and you can see that it doesn't even matter if you were, Hispanic, African American, or white. We've got a 30% drop in kids' ability to self-regulate their behavior from before the pandemic to after. So what that means is their self-control, like their ability to regulate in a classroom. And I'm looking out, and one of our teachers is here, and she is fighting this every day. And she sees it. It is a really intense drop and change. So the next one is language and literacy. You'll see the same thing. It's about a 30% decrease in kids' ability to understand age-appropriate text. So when they're read a story, like Pat was sharing with us, at their age level, their skills at being able to comprehend that are 30% delayed post-pandemic than before. Math will show you the same thing, even a little bit greater for our African American and Hispanic families. So math, the math measure that's used here is number sense of quantity. So kids' ability to understand, 1 through 5 and what the quantity is when they're counting. So it's pretty upsetting to see that. It's upsetting to see the numbers, but I'm not going to lie, what's harder is to see the kids. And so I'll give you some examples of some of the things that we see. This week, even, we had a family bring a child into our assessment team office, which takes kids that were receiving early intervention services, speech, OT, or developmental therapy at home, and then they're turning 3 years old, so they're transitioning to come to preschool for the district. The mom brought the child in. It was the first time that child had ever left home. Had never left home for the last 3 years that they've been alive. They've never been separated from their mom. And they were obviously very shy and overwhelmed, in our environment, but they're gonna start school, and come to our program in the next couple weeks. So you can imagine if you are 3 years old and you've never left your apartment or your home, what that experience could possibly look like for that little one. We have kids that come in. We have many kids that you really see, I think, the language deficit is the biggest thing that you see. So the kids don't talk in complete sentences. They don't ask questions. They utter 1 or 2 words at a time. You see it in their motor skills. Even the kids that were in preschool and now are in kindergarten spent so much time interacting with screens that they don't read facial cues or expressions or tone. Their motor skills are delayed because they didn't play outside, so their large muscles aren't as strong. So then they could be weaker and they're laying on tables and desks. They can't hold pencils and crayons because they've spent so much time swiping on screens. They can't regulate, which was the first slide you saw, because every time they were at home and their whole family was home and they were having a meltdown, they were handed a phone, and that's how they self-regulate. But in school, nobody's gonna give you a screen. I'm not gonna, I'm sure we would love, some of my teachers would love if we could give the kids an iPad or whatever, but that's not what they're there to learn to do. So those are just some examples of things that we're seeing. But whether you love him or hate him, Rahm Emanuel has a lot of great quotes and things to say. He's one of my favorite leaders. And he said, "You never let a crisis go to waste." What I mean by that is that an opportunity to do things that you thought you couldn't do before. And so that's our charge in education. This pandemic gave us a whole new lens and opportunity to shift kind of our old thinking and look at how we can do things differently and better. And so some of the things that we've done in the district to try to work to support our kids and meet them where they are and increase their outcomes are we've offered, increased summer school opportunities, even starting with our preschoolers. So we have rising kindergarten summer school programs. We've increased staffing district-wide. So the district this year hired literacy specialists and I think it was all of our buildings. You have to, don't quote me on this because this is not my lane, but I have heard and seen that. So they've got increased literacy specialists, also more paraeducators and support for students when we can hire them, because the staffing shortage is another real thing that we're dealing with and living with. And then really strengthen our school improvement efforts. So school improvement efforts can look a little bit different. Preschool and early learning opportunities are one way that we work to provide an equitable school experience for all of our kids. So preschool isn't available universally in our school district, but if your family meets the criteria, then they're able to come, hence giving you a boost and an opportunity to increase your outcomes later on. And then we've also looked to expand developmentally appropriate instruction at the middle school and early learning levels. You may have heard in the community that we've got an initiative right now to move our 6th grade to our middle school or our junior high centers, 7th and 8th grade buildings. And then when they move out, we'll be able to open up more preschool in our neighborhood elementary buildings. So really, I just put a couple quotes up here about the importance of early learning, and I like to always cite my favorite study. In the 1960s, the High Scope curricular group conducted one of the largest longitudinal studies on preschool-age children. So they followed 40 preschoolers from the time that they went through preschool, and the 40 preschoolers that they identified were kids that were furthest from opportunity. And they stayed with them until later into their life, until they were adults. And what they found is that the kids were more likely to be employed and to earn more money, less likely to apply for social services. They committed less crimes, had lower rates of teen pregnancy. And so really this is why early learning is so critical in populations similar to ours, that it pays off not just for the individual kids, but for our whole community. So when we all get behind early learning, it benefits all of us. So really to work on increasing our kindergarten readiness, we've been doing many things in our district. So we're really trying to simplify our access points for families into the district. So centralized registration and screening office, so families all come to one place. No matter where you live in U46, you come to one office to help with that. And then really looking to increase opportunities for preschool, like I mentioned, putting preschool classrooms into our neighborhood schools rather than keeping them at centers and the kids on buses. And then increasing home visiting for our families birth to 3. We continue to have partnerships with our daycare providers so that we can teach them the things that we're focusing on, like those 3 standards, so that we're all working with our kids on the same things to get them ready for kindergarten. And then, you'll see Amber up here later talking about our partnership with EPPL, and we work on summer programs in the parks, literacy in the laundromats, and then some calendars and promotional things that we supply our families with to help keep them engaged in early learning. And then also what we've had going on in the district is we've had an audit of our early learning program, which I've gone into more detail with at some of our board meetings, but really looking at how can we set up our district to not just implement more opportunities, but high quality opportunities. We've reduced our class size to 15 in every one of our classrooms. So before we had 17 to 20 kids, but because of the high needs, we've reduced it. I think we could reduce it even more, I'm sure. Julie's nodding, yes, please, but we have to still serve them. We've also refreshed our kindergarten materials and our furniture. We want the kids to get the very best experience when they come to school, and nothing gets kids to talk and enjoy school more than new shiny toys. So we've got lots of new toys and books. And then really looking at our kindergarten transition process. So we've hired 5 new coaches that work within our classrooms, but then also support our kids and families as they transition from preschool to kindergarten. We're part of a larger initiative across the district to implement academic teaming, which is kind of hands-on learning for preschool, kindergarten, but it runs all the way through 12th grade, and we're a part of that initiative as well. And then really we're looking to implement some more social emotional supports for our kids, and in a district this size, it's like moving a glacier. So we're in the initial planning steps to adopt the pyramid model preschool-wide. This is just a little bit of information. I'm not sure, how am I doing, Pat? 2 minutes? 1 minute? Okay. So just to give everybody a little snapshot, right now our half-day preschool capacity is to about 1,200 students. Our full-day capacity is 150 students. So we're serving, you could do the math, about 1,300 students, but we've got 9,843 children under the age, or between the ages of 3 to 5. So we are serving a very, very small fraction of our little guys. So expanding is important. This is a map of where our current preschool sites are within the district. And so you can see there's large areas where there's no preschool opportunities. So what we're looking to do when we're building for our future and increasing the opportunities is to offer the kids first floor classrooms, because they're little guys. They would have bathrooms in their classrooms, arrival dismissal area, playgrounds, and access to indoor play spaces, just more space for learning and engagement. So what we're doing right now to work on this is we're just in the initial planning stages. So we're partnering with the National P3 Center on our audit, which is completed, but hopefully they're going to agree to work with us as we work to build the capacity of our entire district to support increased early learning, and then help us with a 5-year plan on how to roll that out operationally. And we're also going to be forming a steering committee where we're bringing in parent and community voice, so keep that in mind with your call to action. Pat has my contact information if you're interested. And then last, really what we're looking to do is reduce barriers for our families, increase opportunities for our kids, improve their outcomes, and just have greater readiness for school and life success. There you go.
Okay, good evening. Can everyone see me behind this? I wore my heels tonight, so I'd be a little bit taller. Thank you. Well, I think actually just to advance, I'll stay here. Thank you to Women on the Brink and Patricia and the committee for inviting me to be here tonight. I'm going to provide a brief overview of what we are working on, what we've accomplished at the state level to address some of the challenges that we're learning about this evening. And I can tell you that the last several years at the state level have been very active in trying to address the dearth of childcare, affordable childcare, and address some of the educational challenges that we saw during the pandemic. So again, happy to be here to provide an overview on those activities. I have a lot of slides with a lot of information, but I'm going to go through them pretty quickly so that we can get to our panel. So as we've heard, we have nearly 16% of children in Illinois do live in poverty. That tracks. Elgin is about on par with that. I also want to add another statistic. We have about 20,000 children who are living in the foster care system right now in Illinois, which I think is also indicative of many of the challenges that our families face in our state. We know that parents struggle to find adequate and affordable childcare. Based on data from the Illinois Child Care for All Coalition, we know that more than half of the population lives in an area without enough childcare providers. And we actually saw the number of licensed family childcare providers decline over the past several years, and that the pandemic exacerbated that situation. Based on an analysis done in March of 2022, this past spring, nearly a third of parents with young children were not able to find childcare or had a disruption in childcare. And we know that affects working mothers particularly. Women were more likely to stay home during the pandemic or lose their job or downsize in their work responsibilities in order to take care of children during the pandemic. The cost of childcare is expensive. On average, it's $13,000 throughout the state. In Chicago, it's even more. If you multiply that by multiple children, the costs are pretty astronomical. And the people that we are hiring to do this type of work are not paid very well. On average, they get about $13 an hour. Governor Pritzker established the Commission on Equitable Childhood Education, and they recently came out with a recommendation that we as a state should be spending an additional $12 billion a year if we were truly to bring our system up to capacity. and provide every family that needs it with affordable childcare. That's about 6 times the amount that we spend right now on childcare and early childhood education. So the challenge is daunting to meet that demand. So just to provide an overview on what we have been doing, and again, that's like the optimal, the $12 billion. We have not been able to meet that entire goal, but we have increased funding for many of the areas that need additional support, including expanding access to high quality and affordable childcare, addressing the mental health needs of our children, and increasing economic security for families. This next slide is a little dense in text, and I'll just summarize. But I wanted to give you an overview. Last summer, as we were coming out of the pandemic, we know that childcare providers were hit hard and families were hit hard because of the need to stay home and take care of children and the closure of some of our childcare facilities. So as a state, we increased funding for the CCAP program, which is the Child Care Assistance Program for lower income families. We increased the rates for all providers by 8%, and that was a 30% increase from the prior governor administration. Under the prior governor, there had actually been pretty steep cuts to CCAP. So what we did then last year represented a 30% increase over what happened from the prior administration. We also increased the eligibility level from 220% of federal poverty to 225% of poverty, which estimated to serve an additional 20,000 children in Illinois. Child care restoration grants were extended through December of 2022, represented about a $60 million increase for 2,400 child care providers. And the Strengthen and Grow Child Care Grant Program was extended through June of 2023. We also lowered copays for child care providers who are eligible for CCAP. We provided a 3% cost of living adjustment and reimbursement rates for early intervention services, eliminated copays for families experiencing homelessness, and extended eligibility for families who are working at home, and continue to provide childcare assistance for those who are still looking for work, who had been unemployed. In addition, $16 million for parents too soon. That was an increase in home visiting for parents who, for young mothers who need support. And we also extended Medicaid funding for doulas, so that when young mothers who are going through pregnancy the first time would have an assistant who could be paid for through Medicaid funding. We also increased funding for early childhood education programs. We provided a $54 million increase in that program, and special education grants saw a $96 million increase for new services and to train special education teachers in Illinois. And this is on top of the $350 million increase that we are sending to our public schools through the evidence-based funding model that was passed back in 2017, which is primarily targeted at lower-income school districts. So those are the investments, the additional investments we've made in childcare and early childhood education. Clearly, more needs to be done, but this is what we've been able to do over the past year. So we know that we are facing a mental health crisis, not just for adults, but children in particular. We passed legislation back in July of 2021 that amends the Children's Mental Health Act of 2003, setting a goal of having mental health care providers in every school to address the mental health needs of our children. Because of that legislation, the Illinois Children's Mental Health Partnership released a plan this past May focused on 5 goals to make sure that we are improving access to health care for children, and making sure that that there is awareness of these types of programs, that it's easy to navigate, easy to find, and that there's funding for families so it's affordable, so that any child who needs mental health services can receive that. So we know that has been illustrated by our previous speakers, we know that our children the mental health and well-being of our children is very dependent on the economic security of their parents and families. So we've also addressed that area in this last year budget to help people coming out of the pandemic and kind of get at some of the more systemic causes of poverty and low incomes in our state. Just this past year, we expanded the Earned Income Tax Credit. 4 years ago, we increased the minimum wage, and it's continued to increase every year. And we are also looking at housing security. So in terms of the Earned Income Tax Credit expansion, the EITC has been identified as one of the best anti-poverty programs that's out there from a tax perspective. And basically what it does is it provides direct assistance to families who earn under a certain amount who are working. The EITC had not been expanded in Illinois for several years. This year we expanded it to cover all workers from age 18 to over 65. Prior to that, workers under the age of 24 were not covered by the Earned Income Tax Credit, and workers over 65 were not covered. We also expanded the program to allow people who have not achieved citizenship yet in our state to access EIC. So they can use, instead of having a social security number, they can use their ITIN number. That will be starting next year. And we also increased the amount that the state would match from 18% to 20% of the federal program. And the chart shows you the effect that the Earned Income Tax Credit has on child poverty. It has reduced or made over close to 12 million children less poor because of the Earned Income Tax Credit. And that was from 2018. We anticipate, because of what we've done, that it's going to help even more children in our state. As I mentioned, we increased the minimum wage. The former minimum wage had been $8.25 an hour. That had not been increased for 10 years in Illinois. Starting in the calendar year of 2020, we started increasing the minimum wage until it gets to $15 per hour on January 1st of 2025. We know that increasing the minimum wage has an effect on helping to alleviate poverty. It's just a start, but we know. And we know that right now with the job market the way it is, there's been one upside to the inflation that we're all experiencing, and that is we've seen a big increase in wages because of the job market. But this sets a good floor so that we are ensuring that we're raising people's wages at the lower end of the scale. And then in terms of housing security, we appropriated an additional $16 million to help with homelessness prevention in our state, and an additional $10 million to the Department of Human Services to help with eviction mitigations and to help people stay in their homes and pay their mortgages or their rents. We saw a lot of, one of the very proactive measures that was taken during the pandemic was a freeze on evictions. Unfortunately, we saw a steep increase in evictions after those protections were lifted, and so we are seeing families that are needing more assistance. The Department of Human Services also has a homelessness prevention division, and they will provide clients with up to 6 months of assistance for rent or mortgage, and along with supportive services like counseling and job preparation and those types of services. Here in King County, the Community Crisis Center is the hub for those types of programs, along with connections for the homeless in Northern Cook and Prairie State Legal. So that's a snapshot of what we've been working on over the past year. We are clearly, nowhere to addressing the full scope of the problem, and more needs to be done. And there are a couple initiatives that were started last year that I hope to see them come to fruition. We know that temporary assistance to needy families is a lifeline for a lot of our families that are struggling to make ends meet. We had legislation in the House last year that passed out of the House but stalled in the Senate that would increase cash assistance to families who qualify for TANF. And I anticipate that will be brought back to provide more economic security for those at the lower end of the pay scale. Paid family leave has already been mentioned as something that we need desperately to help support our families. There have been bills introduced to create that program, but they've not advanced through the legislative process. And of course, we need to continue to increase and invest in childcare and early childhood programs. $12 billion is pretty ambitious, but clearly we can continue to make greater investments over what we're doing right now. This gives you just kind of a snapshot of where what the calendar looks like. So as we're looking for next steps, we will be going back into veto session after the election in November. And then lame duck in early January. Those two sessions are to deal with legislation and issues that are still outstanding from this past session. And then starting on January 11th, or immediately following, we will have a new General Assembly, and the governor will be inaugurated. And in early February, he'll give his budget address where he will outline his priorities as he sees them for the coming fiscal year. And then we will be in session mid-January to May 31st. So any ideas, budget initiatives, all of the things that we need to make sure that we are continuing to strengthen the safety net and improve the quality of life for our children here in Illinois and in our region, this is the calendar upon which all of those initiatives need to fall. So with that, I will turn it over, but thank you again for having me, and happy to answer any questions if there is an opportunity. Thank you.
Well, that should have your head spinning, huh? I know that was a lot of stats and a lot of information, and if you don't feel the urgency right now, then I don't know what else we can do, right? We're in a space where we really need to amp up the action. You've heard, we're doing a lot around here, and wait, to my panel, come on up. Wait till you see all the other things that we're doing. So we are going to hear from 5 different sectors in our community, and each of them are going to tell you a little bit about sort of what they do and what their how they are trying to impact and mitigate some of these dire statistics that you've heard, and hopefully plant a seed in your head, right? About, I'm going to make you say it out loud too, just in case you have to think about it. What are the next steps we're going to take? So we are so thrilled to have Corey Dixon from the Elgin City Council with us. Jimmy Moeller is Kane County ROE, working with families with housing insecurity. India Smith from the YWCA, our child care guru. Elisa Lara from the Visiting Nurses Association, and Amber Peters from the Elgin Partnership for Early Learning, otherwise known as EPPL. Welcome. And I'm going to ask the first question while while we get this panel started, remember, if you have questions, where's Vanna? Well, there she is. Pass your questions down, raise your hand, and we'll take questions for both the speakers and the panelists, all right? So they'll have their first talking points, and then we'll take some questions, all right? And we will begin with Corey Dixon. And the first question that I would like you guys to talk about is how the pandemic has impacted the services that you're providing to families and children. And then, of course, you have to explain a little bit what your services are and how the pandemic is impacting that.
Yep.
And we'll begin with you, Corey.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for hanging around and listening to what we have to say about what we have going on in our individual areas here. So the city of Elgin, we don't directly provide many of the services that have already been discussed here tonight. And I believe that's actually a part of some of the issues when you are talking about tying these services together and supporting the institutions that provide these services. When you talk about the social services that are provided here in our city and in our school district, there are obvious gaps that are there, and they need additional help, additional funding, and that is something that's very difficult for a city to provide without actually having leadership in a position where they want to provide those services. Years ago, the city of Elgin, we actually used to provide aid to social services, many of the social service entities around the city. And I believe that's actually something that we have to get back to, because we have those. Yeah, let's hear it. Well, I'll take it. Because when you have the professionals and the experts that are capable and ready to provide those services, and a lot of times they just need that additional funding in order to provide that or expand services that are already being provided, I believe that the city should be a leader when it comes to that. We should lead and not be on the sidelines, and that's what I see our city doing in the future, more of that, and I've been an advocate of that since I've been on city council. So from there, I'll go ahead and pass it over. All right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jimmy Pavola. I work with the Kane County Regional Office of Education. I'm the McKinney-Vento liaison. What my program does is we work to remove barriers for students that are basically housing insecure, okay? Let me back that up for a second. How many in here have actually heard of the McKinney-Vento law? Hey, you know what? That's actually the best numbers I've seen since I've been doing this, which isn't that long, but I have been in the housing sector and worked with, groups of students that are in need for about 10 years now. So just a quick little snapshot on what McKinney-Vento is. It was a law that was passed in 1987, and really the goal of that is to give equal access to students that are basically, they have housing insecurities. I try not to use the word homeless. It's kind of a bad word nowadays, okay? So it's always students that are experiencing this or housing insecurities, things of that nature. So there is a grant that comes along with that, and we can provide school supplies, transportation, really anything that's going to remove a barrier, okay, to students gaining equal access to education. For families that are experiencing housing insecurity, something as small as a ride to school, okay, free lunch, things of that nature, that really makes a huge difference, okay, in how successful somebody is in education. So the McKinney-Vento law was passed in 1987, like I said, and then it was reauthorized again in 2015 with the Every Student Succeeds Act. And what it does is it basically guarantees rights to students. So that first right is going to be immediate enrollment, okay, in whatever school that they reside in at that point in time, or their school of origin, which is the school that they last attended before they started facing housing insecurities. They're also guaranteed transportation back to their school of origin. Obviously, school of residency, they will get transportation that's kind of set up for them in that sense. They are also entitled to fee waivers, such as free lunch, driver's ed classes. They can go to dances if they want to participate in sports. Those sports fees are waived. And then on top of that, the other big thing is just basically going to be getting them to school. That's one of the biggest issues I've been seeing so far this year. So as far as COVID's concerned, we saw actually a little bit of what I would call a little bit more of an anomaly. So although we saw housing insecurity rise during COVID, okay, and the needs go up, we actually saw the amount of students being enrolled as McKinney-Vento, being identified as McKinney-Vento, go down, okay, by as much as 1,000 students in Kane County. Very interesting, right? So a lot of that has to do with, I think, of us going virtual. Okay, so a demographic that sometimes can go unseen, or sometimes in society is kind of pushed to the side a little bit, and it's easier to kind of look the other way. They tended to fall off a little bit more. Now that the dust has settled a little, okay, and I'm not saying that COVID's over by any means necessary, but now that the dust is kind of starting to settle, we're seeing our numbers starting to rise again, and I could speak directly to U46. I speak with their McKinney-Vento liaisons pretty much on a daily basis, and they're about 150 students higher than they were at this point last year. Now, if we spread that to our 7 counties, okay, we're going to see that number rise significantly, okay? Other than that, the biggest things that we've seen is there's been a lot of grief, okay? I've seen many families just, you know, anecdotally that have come across my desk they need therapy, they need mental health services due to losing housing, due to losing a family member, due to losing a parent. So a lot of what I do now is try to hook students up in our service area with much needed therapy, because with the different grants that have come around through the COVID era, like the ARP grant, and then also our McKinney-Vento grant, we're actually able to cover some mental health services, which is one of the biggest needs that we're seeing. Also, when it comes to mental health, everybody knows about ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences. These highly mobile families, okay, that we work with, I would make an argument that every time they have to make a move, which sometimes can be 3 to 4 times in a year, from what I hear, okay, I would call that an ACE for that kid every single time, because they got to go into a new classroom with a new teacher. They may be moving in with somebody different that they don't know, okay? And it's great that some families are taking people in and helping everybody out, but it's not a solid set, okay? And what schooling does for students, okay, is it is that solid that they need, all right? So that's basically what I've got as far as what COVID has done. It's going to continue to be an issue. I will continue to advocate for the law first and foremost, okay, and then our students that need this the most.
India, my turn, okay. My name is India Smith. I am the Youth Service Director at the YWCA Elgin, not YM, YWCA Elgin, right down here on Chicago Street. And Julie McClendon is, my mouth's not big enough.
I'm not sure you turned on, baby. I'll try.
Testing 1, 2. Okay, I'll talk louder. I got a big mouth.
No, there you go.
You got me? Okay, all right. India Smith from the YWCA Elgin. Julie McClendon is in the back is my CEO, who's probably my biggest cheerleader. She lets me just kind of run amok. No, she doesn't. She's probably one of my biggest supporters at the YW, along with the board, who's awesome, putting up with me and my nonsense, because I'm going to fight for my families. That's just point blank for me. I love my children. I was telling someone earlier, what I do, it doesn't feel like work to me. I go in, it's something that I want to do, other than the paperwork that Julia keeps giving me. As far as dealing with my families and my children, that's my biggest priority. I think one of our biggest hurdles for our children is food. Food, especially during the pandemic, it's very hard to see a kid come in at 7 o'clock in the morning and they're laying down because their head hurt or their stomach hurts. And you're trying to figure it out. What that is, it's called hunger. So if you've never been there, you might not identify with it right up front. But having been there, I do know what it is. So my job at that point is to go in to Julia, hey, I need more food. What I have is not enough, because not only are we trying to feed them when they're there it's also trying to give them food for when they go home. So then tomorrow doesn't look like the day that it was already. So during the pandemic, that was one of our biggest things. It's just feeding them. If they're not fed, how can I expect them to sit on Zoom, a 5-year-old, this is his first year in kindergarten, he's hungry, and I'm asking him to use a computer that he's not familiar with, and he's trying to learn something. I already see the ADHD that's present and everything that comes along with that, so it's a big mess at that point. So it's our job to try to figure it out step by step and take off those layers, and our first hurdle, unfortunately, was food. Being able to feed them, to have them ready, their mindset ready to receive what the teachers have to say on Zoom, and help them be successful in every day.
Hi, my name is Elisa Lara, and I'm a nurse from the VNA Health Center. VNA is a federally qualified health center for those of you who have not heard of. We have different services for the community. We actually have family, we have behavioral health, family practice, and we actually have obstetricians. We kind of expand depending on where we're at. We have different locations. But one of the things I have seen is that students, kids, it's been a decrease in terms of coming to do screenings, follow-ups. Definitely we were doing even drive-through. We were trying to make sure we meet the medical needs in the community, but there were many challenges. People weren't wanting to come out, and now that we're trying to get people to come, it's a challenge to have them come and catch up to their screenings that they need to do. Kids actually were getting referred to different behavioral health. Some of them need speech therapy, and the parents aren't taking them because they think, oh, they'll go later on and they'll be screened at school, but they're not going to school. So there was a lot of challenges, and we're still seeing a lot of challenges where we're not really evaluating them as soon as we'd like to. Another thing that's really huge is depression. There's a huge increase, and sometimes I've noticed that parents don't know if the kids are depressed or if it's just like we were mentioning earlier, we give them the screen, here you go, entertain yourself. But you don't know if they're really depressed and that's just the way they're kind of handling it. But the communication's really hard. The kids don't communicate that well, and it's been noted, the providers are actually seeing that trying to speak to them, they just kind of withdraw, don't really want to say much, don't want to speak, and we don't know if it's sometimes because of the screening, they're watching playing games, and they're being distracted. And we had a case, actually, it was really sad, he was a little boy, he was very withdrawn, but the mom thought, oh, it's just, that's the way his personality is. And really what it was is he was depressed, and he didn't feel like he had any friends. He couldn't go and play because of COVID. And now that we have that opportunity to try to do a little bit more, the mom's concerned. Well, I don't know, because he doesn't want to interact with other kids. And it's kind of been a compiling effect where he's not socializing, he's very timid, and these things are hard to diagnose because they're not coming in like what they should. The screening, I think, has been a really big challenge for us. I think we've tried to do a lot of referrals. We work with Apple with different places that they can actually help us and have referrals, and we do different things. They've gone to different therapies. But I think that's one of our biggest challenges. We're not really able to evaluate them on time because of these challenges that we've had in those last couple of years.
Hello, let's see if is mine on? Can you hear me? Yeah, it is on. Hi, I'm Amber Peters. I'm from Elgin Partnership for Early Learning, and we are a collective impact early childhood community collaboration. So what collective impact means is that you're trying to solve a problem that you can't solve alone. So to solve, our problem is kids being ready for school and all the things that go into that to be ready for school, which means that all these people at this table are so important. Representative Moeller is so important. Everything that goes on in this community pre-birth to 5 is really important about having kids ready for school. Just like Dr. Susskind said at the very beginning, she's talking about happy, healthy. Our vision is for all children to be happy, healthy, and ready for school, and what all goes into that. So we work on awareness, community awareness, things like this, so people know. When Representative Moeller and I, and actually Pat, we met at one of our laundromat programs where we meet families where they are, where we have a lot of vulnerable families come in, and we push in with services right there. And we met at the laundromat, and we talked about what are some of the issues in the community: access to childcare, awareness to have your kid enrolled, or in high-quality childcare, workforce issues, all of these things. So I'm kind of like a air traffic controller or the conductor for the symphony, where I'm going, you know, this system needs to be doing this, and this system needs to be doing this, and this is, and if all these systems are working well, then we have a really good symphony. But if one of the systems has a crack in it, or something's not working real well right here, then we have to smooth that out. So we do a lot of system building, and just like Katie talked about, Katie and I she sits on our board, as does the library and the YWCA and all these the healthcare systems that are so important. But we also work very closely together because we're trying to, you know, we have this pipeline of these families, and we want to have these access points, and we want to have awareness, and we want to have everything that's really smooth for families. We want to make it easier for families to navigate this system. And if you've never been in the system, it's really hard. You know, you can call, and families have all these needs. We have an 844 kid info line that families call. I had a mom call the other day, and she said, my child is turned 3 like 3 days ago. And she says, you know, they told me that I probably needed early intervention and I needed all these things. And she said, I kept thinking, well, it's just because we've been home for COVID. And she said, my child, now that I said to him, like, when you turn 3, if you're not talking more, then we're going to have to call the doctor. Child's speaking about 5 words. He's 3 years old. So not putting any words together. Mom's got her hands full. We went through the laundry list of other services that she needs. And, you know, I'm not the expert. And I don't need to be an expert because I have all these partners that are the experts. So what I do is I connect them and let them do what their job is. So I started immediately, you know, putting them in the referral system, which we have here in Kane County, that the Kane County Health Department runs. It's called IRIS. It's an integrated referral system, and putting them in and saying, okay, this family needs this. We need to get the child screened, so they need to go in the school district portal. They need WIC services, so I'm referring them to Well Child. So I have all these different pieces that are working at one time so that we can support this family, because we know if the family doesn't have these basic needs met, then having your kid ready for school, or even if you have a shiny new brand new book, you're not going to read it if your lights are out, or if your child is hungry or your family's hungry. So we work the whole system, and we try to build systems that are really strong, that families don't fall through. And we'll talk a little more about some of the things that we do to support all the work that they do to support families.
Thank you. So you see, reason to be hopeful, right? See, lots of reasons to be hopeful. But we have our challenges. I'm going to take a couple questions from the audience at this point. I'll start with an easy one. This one's for you, Jimmy. Does the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness match the HUD definition?
Great question. No, it does not.
Can you use your mic, please?
Yes, excuse me.
Thanks.
Great question. It actually does not. In fact, the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, it's much more wide-ranging than HUD's definition of homelessness. I did work for other HUD grants prior to this with a rapid rehousing program, and literally the only way that you could qualify for services through most of HUD's housing programs is you need to be literally homeless, basically meaning that you are staying in a shelter or a place that is not fit for human habitation, which could be your car, sleeping outside in some sort of forest preserve, maybe one of the several encampments that are here located in Elgin. That's what would qualify you for some of these HUD housing programs. Now, whereas with McKinney-Vento, the definition is actually much more broad, where it actually includes people that are literally homeless, okay, like I just described, but it actually also includes people that are living in hotels or living doubled up due to financial insecurity or financial hardship. So if somebody, let's say, lost housing due to a death in the family for COVID, and they went to go live with their aunt or their uncle, they are technically McKinney-Vento for that full school year. There is no time limit on McKinney-Vento, and really there's no time limit on housing insecurity, and that's one of the big things that I try impress on the school districts that I work with is that, yeah, I understand they may be living doubled up at the same address for 3 years, but has anything really changed? We need to ask those sensitive questions and try to figure out the best way to help these families. Don't come in, with the big muscles and say, hey, you've been here 3 years, please explain your situation. It's more of like, hey, how can we help you? You've been here for 3 years. What can we do to help better your life? How do we take the next step? Can we hook you up with community resources? Can we make referrals through IRIS? And all the other different wonderful things that we do here in Kane County. We do have a great network here. But yes, the definitions do not match as far as HUD's concerned and also McKinney-Ventos. It is much, much more broad, which I think is needed across the board because you can't just really, it's such a small window there if you just put that much there. I think we saw with the stats, just the amazing gap there that says, hey, you qualify for this here, but you're just this close to this over here. So it is good that McKinney-Vento is much more spread out than that.
Can I add one piece to that? A lot of people don't know if you file under McKinney-Vento, childcare can be $1 per month. So that's something that they don't tell you, that you might not know about, but a person that is deemed, unquote, homeless or McKinney-Vento, childcare is $1 per month. And that is for an entire year. It depends on if they receive any type of other money. It could be something, they could be receiving child support, but any other income has to be counted in. So it can be zero if there's no income coming in, but if there's a little amount of, income coming in, depend on that where it falls at on the income level, then it could go up to $1 per month. And that's split between 4 weeks. So you take that dollar times 4.333, and that's their copay for the entire month.
And I'm going to go off that a little bit. Anna was talking a lot about all the investments that the state is making for early childhood, and CCAP is one of them. Some of the laws have changed. Families are getting more funding than they ever have so they can get back to work. And so EPL was one of the recipients of the Birth to 5 grant and also an early care and education grant through IDHS. And what we're working on is that awareness of that there is child care assistance, that families can get child care assistance because we want to get the families back to work. But then you've got the problem of we have a huge slot gap in this community of what I call it butts and seats. There's just not enough seats for all the families that are at that poverty level that need that child care piece. So we have to think strategically about how can those families have some type of access to information and resources so that they get, so they can model those good best practices for families to do with their children at home. So we run a Learning on the Go program in the summer that goes into 8 neighborhoods, 5 in Elgin, 3 in Streamwood Hanover Park. We have laundromat programs where we have bilingual teachers that are in there so that we can meet families where they are. We have playgroups that we've been meeting here at the library because it got too cold outside and we're getting ready to move into Zion Lutheran Church. So that families have, because there's not enough seats, but families can come to other places to build community with each other, also get new books, get different materials to use, and get the resources they need to be served if they can't get into child care programs because they can't afford it. But that's the things, that's how this policy stuff works, right? It's really important that we keep pushing the policy because if they can get these things worked out, then our families can get into the programs because we just can't serve enough programs, enough children in the school district. And there's only 2,000 days from the time a baby's born until they come to school. So we really have a lot of work to do during those 2,000 days.
Well, it also brings up the notion that the idea related to workforce, which I think I'm going to throw to Corey here, because you all are starting to work on your strategic plan, the city of Elgin, and workforce is part of that. It's at least part of that conversation, right? So we've heard that, we've heard workforce is an issue because we don't have child care providers, because we don't pay them enough. We have not enough teachers because nobody wants to do that job anymore. That's way too hard. We have lots of competition in the marketplace for the few workers that we have. So the whole notion of workforce development for our community is a huge one. How do you see what's happening in Elgin in terms of supporting that need?
Yeah, workforce development is an issue from top to bottom, and it's all connected. It's connected from a child being born to properly being ready and to ready to go to school, to a kid graduating high school and being prepared. Now, let me start from the beginning. So school district U46, I'm a product of school district U46. I love the district. All of my children are in school district U46. I have 3 daughters. 2 of the daughters needed some additional assistance, one with speech and the other with social emotional, because she was born right before the pandemic, essentially. And so so when we were talking earlier about the services that are being provided for those pre-K to kindergarten kids, I know how valuable that is, because it goes a long way. And if a child does not receive those resources, those services, what happens is that things snowball, and it goes from one grade to the next grade, and they are constantly always behind until they get to high school, and when they are still behind, and now those social emotional needs or whatever delays that they did have really start to come out, and now they are acting out, and now they're having issues, and then it rolls into something else where they're not even prepared and ready to go into the workforce, and or they're having so many issues in school that they don't finish the school. And then you have corporations, businesses that are looking at our city and saying, what kind of workforce can you provide us? And it's hard to say, we can provide you the very best at every turn when we know that we're having some issues because of the demographic of our city. And a lot of families are low income and they don't have access to those resources, but our school district does a really great job in trying to provide those things, but it's just not enough. And it's not going to be enough right now. We really have to double and triple a lot of those things. So as far as on the city side, what we do is I sit on a board called Alignment Collaborative for Education with Nancy Coleman. I'm on the executive board there, and that's a partnership. That's an organization that was developed out of a partnership with the city and also the school district. And its goal, mission, is to get our youth ready and prepared for the workforce. Because what we know is that there are going to be more jobs than there are qualified individuals ready to work them. So if you don't proactively get ahead of that and start working with those children and trying to close those gaps, you don't get ready. You're not ready when that time comes. So that is an initiative that the city has been working on for years now, a board that I have been sitting on for a while now. And when it comes to our strategic planning, we're thinking about that. We're working with our Chamber of Commerce, we're working with our Downtown Neighborhood Association, we're working with the experts who are in the business field and saying what we need to be doing right now with our kids in order to make sure that they're prepared when that time comes. And so those are, really across the board what we're doing.
Okay. It's so complex, right?
Yeah.
Their fingers are in lots of places. This one's for Katie. In selecting children for early intervention or special services, is there a consideration for only children because of their, especially from the pandemic, lack of socialization, behind in social skills? And then the second thing, is there a consideration for children lacking normal parental education and attention due to parents' mental or medical condition situation? Yeah.
I think it's good. I'm loud. Okay, so the first question about being an only child, there's not a consideration for that. However, it would be captured in their developmental screening. So if the child had like a developmental delay with their language development or their social skills because of maybe being an only child or some other factors, it would be captured there. So while it's not really directly like because they're an only child, but it is captured in a developmental screening. And then the second question about parents' profiles and their experiences, lived experiences, yes, the answer is that is considered in their eligibility for our preschool programs. So if a child or if a parent was not born in our country, if the family speaks multiple languages, more than one language in their home, if their income is considered, if they're a military family, it's considered. I'm trying to remember all of them. If they have involvement in the prison system or juvenile justice system, all of those kind of family factors are factored into their eligibility. So kids receive points, and then at a certain level of risk factor is when we accept them in. So typically for our half-day preschool, the families would have to have 4 of those risk factors to come in, and then in our full-day program, they would have between 4 and 6 of those factors to come in right now.
And that's for state-funded pre-K. We also have Head Start, which is another another publicly funded early childhood option, which also addresses similar needs and has similar criteria, except that the poverty level issue is weighs more predominantly in that. And also, there is a birth to 3 prevention initiative or home visiting. Those factors are also considered in terms of eligibility within that context.
Yeah, Pat,
Amber?
I want to say one thing that I think speaks to kind of what Katie spoke to, but also what Corey also spoke to about the workforce. So if a child goes into one of the parents' teacher programs, home visiting, whatever it is, part of that instruction is done in Spanish. The U46 has the largest dual language program in the nation. So when you're looking at workforce and these children who are starting in our preschool programs or our home visiting programs or at the YWCA where they're doing ESL classes and they have, when the parents are in ESL classes, the children are also in school birth to kindergarten until they go to school. Our workforce, it's going to take a little bit, but it's going to be amazing. These children are thinking in 2 different ways, and their language, they're going to be bilingual and biliterate, and it's just going to be amazing, strong community. So we're working on these pieces from the time they're babies all the way up until they're getting jobs in the community, and I think it's just a really exciting and special time for our community.
It is, and I was on a call earlier today. The University of Chicago, for those of you who are geeky academics, University of Chicago has just published a wonderful study that looked at Chicago public school bilingual kids and looked at their achievement after they've graduated from a bilingual program and are no longer considered English language learners, and looked at their achievement in literacy and math compared to all of CPS, and they outperformed all of Chicago public schools kids if you were a former English language learner. And we've got even stronger programs in U46 than we have in CPS. So we got some good things going for us, which gives us leads to this next question quite nicely. I'll pay you $5, whoever wrote this one. So the question is, we have wonderful agencies that are in place to address language, the language needs for non-English speakers, and we're getting we have many non-English speakers or dual language learners in our schools. Where is funding coming from? So Katie said one thing, where funding comes from is from the Early Childhood Block Grant, because you get extra points if you speak another language at home. You get extra points. But where else do we get money from? Elisa, you get extra money to provide services, right?
Right, there's different grants that we actually do receive from federal grants. And I think depending on the needs that are there, we also do try to do some fundraising. I think that's another thing that we work with as well. So I think we work in different underserved areas, and depending on the area we are at, we actually try to see what grants are available. How can we meet the community needs based on that?
And if I can,
Yes, please.
and if I can add to that, when you don't have the money, seemingly, you got to find the money from in places where you're already spending it and reallocate those funds. And you have to put your money where where the things that are really important into having. For example, we at the city, we were having an issue inside of our schools in combination with U46, but we were having issues inside of our school with some of the youth, with some of the young kids, the young men and young women who were having these same exact issues that we're talking about today, just snowballing, and they were getting into trouble. They were getting written up in school. They were being suspended. Sometimes they were even being arrested if whatever they did in school led to that. But these were all byproducts of them not getting the attention that they needed at an earlier stage. So long story short, I worked with the chief of police, school district U46 and some community leaders and created a program called the Youth Empowerment Program. So those same kids who were getting in trouble are now being diverted and being mentored. But what we had to do is take the money to pay for this program from somewhere else. So sometimes it is going out there and getting the grant money, and then sometimes it's out there just finding the money and reallocating it from elsewhere.
It's true, priorities, we always need more money, don't we? We always need more money, but there's a follow-up. This question is somewhat of a follow-up because it talks about, we know the number of Hispanic families in our community is large, and but the question is, where is the representation of that demographic in our leadership? And this really speaks to questions of equity, right? And I think in our strategic plan, I was at the strategic planning thing the other day. So I think equity was one of the pillars for the new strategic plan. So is what's being done across the board to develop both youth leadership at the grassroots level, but also leadership throughout our Hispanic community?
I'll say one thing. Yesterday, I had the honor of going to NIU to a conference. It's called Educators Rising, because one of the things that I work on is also workforce, getting enough child care providers, family care providers in our area to care for the children. And, one of the problems is we just don't have anybody going into the field. I mean, when you're making $13 an hour and you get to listen to screaming children all day, I can't imagine why somebody wouldn't want to choose that field. And I used to be one of them. I was a kindergarten teacher for 7 years before I had my own children. So I've been in the trenches, so I understand the work well. But I sit as the co-chair for Alignment Collaborative that Corey was speaking of for the workforce development for teachers. And so we have these pathways coming out of the school districts, which is one of the things we're doing to bring access and equitable practices for these children, where they can choose different pathways that they might be interested in. It doesn't mean if they pick that they think they might want to be a teacher that they have to be a teacher, but it does give them a little bit of opportunity to explore that field a little more. And so yesterday we had the different high schools coming to NIU, and they got to hear the teacher of the year for 2022, who was a Spanish teacher from Oregon, Illinois. She was fantastic. Those children were dialed in on her. She was just fantastic. The children got to learn they got to do a tour of the campus. They also got to hear about all the opportunities for them to go to college. They can go to ECC and they can end up with a 4-year degree from NIU or Judson or Aurora or all these different places. There's a lot of scholarships and opportunities for children right now I say children, I should say youth, that are coming out of the schools. And when I was sitting there and I'm just seeing all these students come by, 95% of them were Hispanic, and I was so proud of our community because all I could think about is, oh my gosh, we're going to have this workforce of teachers who can care for our children and that are bilingual and biliterate that are coming out of our school districts, and then they're going to stay home and they're going to educate our young children that are being born probably right now at Advocate Sherman Hospital.
Elisa?
I think another thing that I'm really honored to do is with VNA, we get to go out in the community and do presentations. But one of the things that I've done is actually gone to schools and talk about how I became a nurse. And I will be honest, I felt like I would not be able to do that because my English was terrible. I would say the roads constipated instead of congested. So I know I had a lot of words to learn appropriately. And then Latin language was a total different, realm of, that's a whole different language to me. So I just figured, how am I ever going to do this? And then the books, they were heavier than I was, carrying them, I looked like a turtle, So I just figured this is something that I felt like it was challenging. And to talk to students that really want to do this, I think, I have I've lived it, I walked it with different challenges, many personal challenges I went through. But just to let them know, what, anything you want to do, it's achievable. You may look like me, not necessarily short and, but, we're colorful people, right? So I just think that if you want to achieve a dream, you can do that. And we have so many people here that have actually inspired us to be able, I used to shake if I would talk in front of 2 or 3 people. My leg would start, you could see me, look like I was about to have a seizure. And now to the point where you kind of expand yourself and go to different things. I did the Elgin Academy leadership, and I figured, oh my gosh, I will never be able to talk in front of people. And now they can't shut me up. So it's like, it works, But I think the opportunity to be able to be there and try to let other people know that if you have a dream, you can do this. Being a leadership is working with a wonderful community that we have, and I think it helps you grow. And I think that we're on the right path. We have so many different organizations that help us grow. We have the Elgin Hispanic Network. We give scholarships. We have many people that have challenges to go to school. I was one of them. I didn't think we were going to be able to afford it. But you have opportunities that say, oh, maybe just a little help. This little opportunity will help me at least move up a little bit more. And these little scholarships that we might not think is much, it actually gives you that courage to say, you know what, I could do this. I can actually get a scholarship and start at least the process. And I think those little, how do you say in English, a little nugget of information and opportunities help you grow and do a little more of I can help somebody else. And in the Elgin Hispanic Network, we actually even have where we kind of mentor somebody who, either a nursing or a lawyer or whatever we have, teachers, you know what, this is what we did. How can we help you? And this is something that we had done in the past, and that is a wonderful opportunity to try to show anybody can grow and be a leader, and opportunities that we can't let pass by.
And I'll add to that a little bit. So the question was, what are we doing to develop Latino leaders here in the community, right? So I went through a program through U46 called the African American and Hispanic Parent Leadership Institute. After going through that program, I came back and I started teaching the program to the Latino parents that were in the program, teaching them the same leadership skills that I've learned that were taught to me, and advocating, helping them learn how to advocate for not only their children that were in school district U46, but encouraging them to run for office. And you have to have that representation. Our city is almost 50%. I think it's over 50% because everyone doesn't complete the census. So we have a city that's over 50% Hispanic, and we have, at least on city council, we have one Latina sitting on our city council, and that's just ridiculous because although I may identify, although I can advocate, but you need someone that comes from that community too. I think it's really important to have sitting up there advocating for what they know, for what the culture that they're connected to. So that is something that I've always seen to be an issue. And before I even came on city council, it was something that I knew was a problem, which is why I was teaching that program. But we have to have more of that going on. But I also want to say too, the Elgin Hispanic Network, we just awarded a scholarship through the commission that I sit on, which is the Human Relations Commission. We awarded scholarship funds to the Elgin Hispanic Network, which those funds are going to a college student or a future college student, someone. And so that's something that I'm very proud of and that we're going to continue to do. Also sit on the board of Food for Greater Elgin, and about 90% of our clientele are Hispanic families, right? So it's advocating for the community in every facet and not just in one way, and that's how you make sure that you don't lose people through these holes, and that you gird them up and put them in a position to be leaders.
Oh, I think you have lots of opportunities to
and
be
Corey's
thinking.
right when you're talking about the census. Birth to 5 is the most undercounted group of anybody. We know that there's about 10,000 children right here in Elgin that are birth to 5, but we don't know how many there, that aren't counted.
Yeah. I know this is getting, we're getting down to the wire here. This is for you, Anna. I mean, other people as well, but I'm going to give this one to you to answer first. What's the most important legislation for us to lobby for right now? Everybody's going to get a chance, but Anna first.
That's a great question.
I know it's a hard one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't point to one specific piece of legislation that's out there right now, because we are not in session at the moment. We won't be going back, and we won't be starting our new session until January. But I mentioned the legislation that would have expanded TANF, which I think is important for, they changed, TANF changed in the mid-90s from mostly cash assistance to programming. And we know that lifting people out of poverty, they need access to resources. And so in the earned income tax credit expansion that we did this year, that's one way that we're trying to do that. TANF is another. TANF is temporary assistance to needy families. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. I know we get into a lot of acronyms at the state level. It's taken me forever to learn all of them. But that's just one example. But I mean, I think overall, we have an election coming up, November 8th, and think about people, like when you're thinking about supporting and solving the issues that you care about, that's a very important thing. I'll just say it that way.
Well, I'll say it for you. When you go to the polls, make sure that you vote for Anna Moeller. All right. Make sure that you vote for Christina Castro. All right. They're some of the finest leaders in this city.
I agree.
So I just want, she won't say it, but I don't mind.
But I will also say, Anna did not come to this because she's running. She came to this because she is such a community leader and she has such a passion for our community. Because you don't just see her during election time, you see her everywhere all the time, as with Corey. So we appreciate that.
You guys are very, this is not meant to be.
No one has been paid for this.
No, they are not.
But, we did see what happened. I mean, and to be quite honest, we did see what happened under the prior administration. And I mentioned, we saw, when we're talking about childcare, we saw dramatic cuts in the amount of funding for childcare under the Rauner administration.
Yes.
To the fact that almost every family would not have been eligible.
Yeah, absolutely.
We reduced eligibility rates to such a, you had to be almost making nothing to be eligible for childcare. We had, can I just tell one super quick story? Back summer when we didn't have a budget the third year, and we were having to cut, he had cut childcare because we didn't have a budget. We had to travel down to Springfield in September to restore the funding that he had cut. And we had 71 people in our chamber who would reverse the cut. He needed to have 71 in order to prevent him from vetoing whatever change we made in the General Assembly. We had a woman who was dying from pancreatic cancer, in my caucus who left the hospital, Esther Golar. She left the hospital in Chicago to travel to Springfield to vote on that bill. Unfortunately, we had another member of my caucus who was playing games and had kind of been paid off by our former governor who never showed up. So the bill, we couldn't pass it anyway. But Esther Golar will forever be a hero to me because she died 2 weeks later after taking that vote. But because she understood how important it was to families to restore funding for childcare, that she literally, shortened her life to make that vote. I tell that story when people get cynical about politics and whatnot. There are a lot of people who really care very deeply about these issues. And, Esther will always be one of my heroes because of what she did. But again, like when you are, elections matter, leadership matters, and all of the progress that we made can go away. That's all I know.
Okay.
And vote for her.
Thank you.
Pat, can I just tell something that makes me think of a story that I'll tell really quickly? I got a call from a mom who had met one of our bilingual teachers that was at the laundromat, and she'd gotten a card, and on it, she'd run out of the 844 Kid Info card, so it was my business card, and it said, call Amber, and she said, I was getting ready to throw it away, and then I thought, those ladies said that she could help me, so she calls me, and she said she had a whole host of issues that she needed, but she needed to work, and she didn't know that she could get child care assistance funding, so she wasn't aware of that. And then she needed after-school care for her child, and she needed child care, and she needed all these things, all these different systems to work so that she could go back to work. So I went on the IRIS, this referral system, and I sent one to India. India had got her child care assistance funding pushed through at the Y, and that child got enrolled in child care. I got the other one in with the child care assistance. I got her into a local kinder care program. There was all these referrals that I made, and the mom called me on Mother's Day. I almost didn't answer the phone, and I was like, that's odd. That's an Elgin area code. I'm going to answer it. And so I said, Elgin Partnership for Early Learning. And she said, Amber, I just want to tell you that all the things that you helped me get signed up for, she said, I got an offer at Chase Bank. And she said, I've been trying to get a job for all this time. And she didn't realize all these things were available to her so that she could get back to work. And I'm like, and it was just a matter of me making just a few referrals. And it wasn't that I had done anything special. It was that my expert friends that have all these services that are available to children and families did their job. I mean, that's our job, is to do these things. And it changed this lady's life.
Which, I'll pay you for your 5 miles. You're old people money left and right, aren't I? So that brings us to our closing thought, right? Where do you fit into this picture, right? What part of the song are you going to play? You can donate. You can volunteer. You can advocate. And I'm going to let each person at the table here, the panel, give you one idea of something you could do in this realm that would support the work that they do. And I'm going to start with Jimmy.
Go vote.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
All right.
Okay, you can't.
I'm glad I got to go first. That's going to be the biggest one. Secondly, please advocate. Okay. There are just a myriad of issues that are happening, specifically in the housing sector that I see. There's discriminatory practices. If you know people that have units for rent, okay, please talk to them. Right now, simple supply and demand, rents through the roof with inflation. A lot of these landlords, they're requiring, 3 times the monthly rent just to get somebody in there. And it's not feasible. It's not feasible at all. So advocate on that sense. I think housing at this point is actually one of the main cruxes that kind of add to this. There's not enough available in Kane County. I was part of a small local survey when I was with the Office of Community Reinvestment where we surveyed about 15,000 units in Kane County, both north and south. And we actually came up with about a 0.5 percentage point was what the vacancy rating was. Now with the raising rent on top of that, it basically prices out a whole demographic of people. So please advocate.
Okay. India.
Refer. If people have questions, please refer them out. If you don't know the answer, Julia makes me take all calls anyway, even though they're not even childcare sometimes. And if I can't find the answer, I have her pulling her hair out. So refer, ask questions, try to point them in the right directions. Iris is awesome. When I can't find different stuff, I reach out to Amber, I blow her phone up. Just refer people out. If we can't help, there's somebody else that might have the answer, but ask questions.
Thank you. Elisa.
I think one thing is be a bridge. And connecting, helping, answering questions. I mean, how can I be a bridge to somebody else in our community, with different organizations? I think sometimes we underestimate our possibilities, but I've had many bridges that's helped me grow in different ways, even in speaking. So I think, how can we be a bridge? Because I think we all have such a big power and an opportunity to help our neighbors that I think it's an amazing, even for children, adults, everybody. I think we can all be a bridge, and together we definitely form a wonderful, huge community.
Amber?
I would say that ready babies are ready children, and you think about, why do I work on all these other things? Because we know that if families aren't ready, that children aren't ready for school. And so what my ask would be is that next week there's still another opportunity to be on the strategic plan for the city of Elgin. I was on the call today, and I think it gives you a really good opportunity to advocate for the things that you'd like to see in that 5-year plan. Of course, I was on there to push for children and families, and to make sure that we have opportunities that are in a line. But if this is your opportunity to tell what you want.
And Corey, the final word.
Yes, I don't have just one, I have a few, but I'll tell them real quick, okay? Number one is be kind. And today, you don't know what people are going through. You don't know what their struggles are, if it's from mental health to substance abuse to poverty, whatever the situation is. Be kind to your neighbor. Number two, I would say volunteer, get involved. Every one of you has a gift. Every one of you has something that you're really good at. Every one of you have a voice. When you leave here today, don't just go home and snuggle in your bed or on your couch and wake up and go about life as usual. I'm just going to challenge all of you that are not involved in anything to get involved somewhere. Your voice is needed. Find a table and make sure that your voice is heard. There's somebody that you can affect positively by just standing up and saying what needs to be said, sitting at the table, and being an advocate. And it sounds really scary, but we need you. And during these times, no one should be sitting at home. So I need you to do all these things. I need you to donate. I need you to advocate. I need for you to volunteer, and I need you to put that on repeat. So that's what I mean.
Jennifer actually has a word for us.
Well, those of you who know me know that I couldn't stop without saying something else. And so in your packet, we have social service agencies, we have government. You assume that they're the ones who are going to solve these problems. I want you to give a thought to something else. There are 3 organizations I want to talk to you about in your packet. One is the American Association of Universities.
You really need to use me.
Here.
Okay, so I don't know what you heard so far, but what I'm going to say is, in your packet, besides being the social service agencies and the government agencies, there are 3 organizations that help co-sponsor this tonight. And I want you to think about your role in joining them and helping. So I'm going to give you one example. American Association of University Women gives 2 scholarships every year, one of them dedicated to a minority. And it's always a woman in Elgin who's going to school. League of Women Voters is going to help you get through the voting process, and Women on the Brink is always trying to come up with other ideas of how we help these women and children who are on the brink of poverty. So all of these things are good ideas. The 3 notions are good ideas, but also think about organizations.
One other thing, I didn't get to every question, but the last 2 had to do with training, and so we'll look into these. One was, Jimmy, can you provide training for in the community
Yes, please
Right.
contact me.
And-
That's what I do. So
That's
yes,
his-
I would come to your organizations. Really, it's a goal to get more early education children identified for McKinney-Vento. So please, if at all possible, reach out to me. I will actually give you my information and maybe blast out if that's okay.
Yep.
But yes, I am available. I can train the community. Like I said, for whatever reason, McKinney-Vento is the nation's kind of best kept secret. I'm glad that as many people in this group knew what it was. People I encounter on a day-to-day basis, they're like, wait, what do you do? Again, please, I am available, and I'd love to do that.
And there's also one about do some training on opening childcare centers. And we'll put that on our to-do list, won't we, Amber?
Yes, yes, we will. I already have one set up about family care providers.
Yeah. So that's right up our line here. So we're going to end with the last couple pages of Change Sings, and I hope you're feeling musical now because we are the waves starting to spring, for we are the change we sing. And we're what the world is becoming, and we know it won't be long now. We all hear change coming. Won't you sing along? I invite you all to sing along with us. And under your chairs, there's 4 little stickies, orange stickies under chairs, and those 4 folks will win Change Sings, your very own copy. So see, there's a reward for coming out and staying out till 8:30. Thank you all very much, and we really appreciate preaching to the choir, but we're so happy that you were here. Thanks. Thank you to all our presenters as well.
Can you take a picture of us?
Yes, yes.